Welcome back. Next up, we're going to add icons in. So rather than these numbers, let's put a die or dice icon right there. And it should have the correct, number of dots and look like a die instead of a number in a box. So to do that, there's a lot of libraries that have dice icons. You could also make your own SVG icons. There's some photos and images you can find online, but I'm going to use Font Awesome. And I mentioned that there is a node module that you could use instead. There's actually a React component that you can install. But what I'm going to do, instead of using the CDN like we've been doing every time, this works great. You just copy it, put it inside of your index.html, just like adding, Google font. We've done it a couple times. But if you keep scrolling down, there's other ways to use. I'm going to click on NPM. And then there is a free version and a pro version. We're going to use the free version. And we're going to run this npm install at Fort Awesome. Always throws me off. Fort Awesome it's related. I don't know why. Maybe they couldn't find Font Awesome. Maybe for some reason they already registered something under Font Awesome, and I don't really know the difference. But we're on the Font Awesome webpage, so we're going to go over to our terminal and we're just going to run that command. It will take a moment, and then we'll restart the server. Okay, and then if we look at what is actually contained, what we get when we do that installation, we're going to want just the all.css file. That just includes all of the icons. We don't need SVG and JavaScript stuff. So it's inside of a CSS folder /all.css. So we're going to go back to our code and we need to import it. And where we import it depends on where we want to use it. So a standard place to do that is index.js. If you wanted to have access to these Font Awesome icons all over your app, if you wanted to be able to use them in every component, so we need to import, and this is the most annoying part, except it's auto-completing for me, thankfully. So at fortawesome /fontawesome-free /css /all.css. And now we should have access to it everywhere. And let's test it out in our game component where we have the H1 anywhere in here. Let's put an icon. So it's I, class name, equals, and then it's FAS for a die, FA-dice dash, let's do 6, just like that. Come back over here, and there we go. So we now have access to those icons. And honestly, we could just put it in, we could include the Font Awesome package inside of the die component where we're using it. But in case you want to use it somewhere else, I'll just leave it in the index. Okay, so we don't want it here, so I'm going to get rid of it. Now we're going to go to our die component. The problem we have is that these icons need to use English words like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spelled out. And that's not quite going to work with what we have at the moment, because the only data we have inside of this die component in the props, if we roll and then go to our React Dev Tools, look at one of these die components inside of dice, they have a value of 1. So we need to convert the number 1 to the string ONE. Same thing for all these other values here. So I'm going to come over here, and then in my die component, I want to define an array that just has those string values. So I'll fast forward and type this out. Now, this is not a good place for it, just floating in the middle of nowhere. We're not even saving it to a variable or storing it. So we have a couple of options of where this could go. We could just put it in render, const, let's call it word nums, number words. Let's do that. Like that. And that's not really problematic, except for the fact that we are declaring it every time render is called, and this never changes. So if we have some data that's not going to change, we could add it to the class itself, like this dot word nums to the instance equals that array. But because there is potential for someone to override these, and maybe we're working with a 10-sided die, for example, and someone could pass something in through props to replace these words. So I'm going to make it a default prop. So static default props, but you don't have to do this in order to get it to work. And then we'll rework this to be number words is equal to that. And now inside of my render, I can reference this.props.number words. So just a small stylistic choice to put it there. It will always be these 6 numbers or these 6 strings for us. but somebody could override it. It makes it more extendable, more customizable. So now what we need to do is take the value of this button, the thing we're actually showing. So this is going to be like 1 or 2 is what we're seeing over here. When I re-roll right there, we want to take that number and turn it into a string. And we have an array, so it's pretty easy. The only thing we have to keep in mind are the indices. So if my number is 4, I can't just do array of 4 because index 4 is actually right here because we start at 0. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So instead, we need to do 4 minus 1 to get the index of 3, 1, 2, 3, which gives us the correct string. So we're going to want to do something with this dot props dot val minus 1, and then use that in this dot props dot number words. So that will now give us the word itself, like 4 or 3. And then we need to take this word and stick it onto the end of FAS, FA dash dice dash, and then insert 6 or 1 or whatever the string is. So I'm going to make a variable here. We could do this inline, but I'm going to make a variable called classes and then use backticks so that I can interpolate in there and just add this right there inline. So this gives us a new variable called classes. And I'm also going to move this die to the front of that. So we have all of our classes contained here. And now class name is just going to be classes. So this string of multiple class names, one of them dynamic. Okay, we can also remove this down here. This is what is going to display the actual value. We don't need that number to show up anymore. Also, this is a button. We should change it to be an icon. So let's see what happens. Fingers crossed when we roll. Okay, so we're getting those dice. They're showing up. They don't look beautiful, but they're there. So a couple things we can do to make it a little better. We can add in another class. There's a class from Font Awesome, FA-5X, to make our icon appear larger. So it's not looking great, but it's there. Next, let's get rid of this extra styling. So if you go to the die CSS file, this is the existing styling that I gave you for when we were working with numbers, but we're not working with numbers, or we're not displaying the numerals anymore. So you can comment that out, and I've instead given you some other styles you can uncomment, and these styles you can use just to make things look nicer. So the die class, die locked, which we'll talk about in a moment, some hover classes, looks like there's an extra bracket in there. And if we take a look now, great, we're almost there. There is some weird stuff in the background, and that's happening because we're setting the style manually right here. We're saying if this.props.locked, make it gray. If not, make the background black. So when you click, that's what we get in the background. It's gray. When you toggle it back to being unlocked, it's black. But now there's actually a class that I've given you in die.css called die-locked. So we'll go back to die.js and get rid of this entire line about style. And instead use that class. But when do we want to give it that class of die-locked? We want to do it when the die is locked. So we would just do if this.props.locked. I'm just going to add it into classes. So I'm going to do classes plus equals die locked. It's a little bit janky, but this is fine because the way classes work, we have to just build the string and separate things by spaces. And that also reminds me, we need to add a space here. Otherwise, we're adding this class, FA-5X die locked. So we want a space for a separate class. This will be added in if this.props.locked is true. So let's see now what we end up with. Awesome. So we have our 5 dice showing up. And then this is the new locked style. So lock and unlock. And if you take a look in the CSS, all that locked does is change the opacity. So it's 50% more transparent than before. And I removed a text shadow. So I don't know if you can see it very well in the video. There is a shadow down here. And then when it's locked, it's almost like it's going two-dimensional again, which is what I was trying to do. Not much of a designer, but think it looks kind of cool. It's better than just changing the color. Anyway, that's all there is for the die locked. The last thing we can do to clean this up, we're referencing this.props a lot. So the same thing that we did in the rule row.js, where we grabbed all the values we wanted from this.props into nice individual variable names, we can do the same thing here. So at the top of our render, I'm going to do a const, and there's quite a few things we're going to grab. There's number words, that's in the props up here, even though it's default props. There's also locked, there's val, and is there anything else we're using for now? I think that's it. We'll come back and update this in the next video when we work on animating things, and we're going to set that equal to this.props. So now anytime I have this.props in my render, I can delete it and just do number words because I grabbed it from props. I can do val, grabbed it from props, and locked, grabbed it from props. Okay. So that cleans things up a little bit. We're building this string of class names. We're adding onto it, potentially, if this.props.locked is true. And then we're returning an icon now that has all of these classes. And everything still looks the same. Works. Awesome. So we can toggle on and off. There is one minor thing that I did want to touch on. It's really just a minor UI improvement. Right now, when we exhaust all of the roles and I can't roll anymore, I can't toggle the die or the dice. Jeez, that's been tripping me up. I can't toggle any of them, but the cursor is not changing to tell me that like it is for the button. See how we have the no sign, the go away sign? We don't get that over these dice. So it's really easy for us to do that. I've actually already given you the styles in die.css. When the die is disabled, cursor is not allowed. But right now, they're never disabled. So what we'll do is just pass down a prop called disabled. And when do we want that to happen? We want to disable all of the dice when 0 rolls are left. So when rolls is set to 0, or rather num rolls. So that is in game.js. Right here we have access in the state to, where are you? Rolls left. So I'm going to pass down a new prop to the dice component called disabled, and set it equal to this dot state dot rolls left, and if it's equal to 0. So this will just be true or false. So pass down true or pass down false. Okay, so that goes to the dice component, and then from the dice component, we'll open that up. Where are you? And we'll pass down, in addition to our key and our index, we'll pass down disabled, which will just be this dot props dot disabled. So we're going from the game component down to the die component. Now we just need to use the prop disabled on its long journey down, 2 different components, pass it down to the die component. And then in here, let's grab it from props. So we have our own variable now. And then we just want to make this icon disabled when disabled is true. So this is just like on a button. If we set disabled to true, right now they'll all be disabled except for the fact that there's some hover styles overriding it. So let me just show you. Here we go. They're disabled. But we don't want that to happen all of the time. So we're going to set it to disabled, which is passed through from the game component down to the dice component down to the die component, and we're using it here. And as far as the stylings, it's very simple. Right here, the only thing that was overriding it is this style. Die disabled, cursor not allowed. And if you want to make some changes, do something else, maybe give it a different color or something else to show that it's disabled, you can do that. But this works for us now. So we run out of roles, and now it's just clearer that we can't click on these. Just an optional thing.